And now Mr. Powell is telling us investors that we have no recession in sight. In fact, a soft landing is, it's maybe not exactly the base case, but it's highly likely, or at least possible. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. What is he talking about, Kerry? We have it's amazing to me how, the emperor has no clothes, and then what's the guy in The Wizard of Oz, the guy behind the curtain,
The wizard.
The wizard over there, thank you. I mean, they're telling you that there's no recession likely until maybe 2024, but we're in one now. It's not my opinion. I mean, what is a recession? Like my dentist says, I have recession in my gum. It's a pulling back, it's a contraction. Well, the way they define a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. Well, Q1 was minus 1.6, and the Atlanta Fed has us contracting about the same rate. It was negative 2.1 before we got the bogus employment report from the Labor Department on last Friday, and we'll touch on that too, I'm sure. Remind me if I don't get to it. Sure. Either way you slice it, we have 2 back-to-back negative quarters of GDP growth. We are in a recession. So I don't know what the big deal is. Why can't we just admit it and say, yes, the economy is contracting, and we have a Federal Reserve that cannot come to the rescue like they usually would in this instance. Believe me, if inflation was still at 1.7%, remember, Kerry, let's just reminisce back to the good old days, the halcyon days of 2018, 19.
I like that word.
When the Fed was just telling us, an economy just can't function unless inflation is 2%. If it's 1.7, it's the end of all incarnation. It's an existential threat to you as an American and to the US economy. 1.8, still not quite. Let's get it to 2 at a minimum. Well, we got to 2, and then we got to 20 very quickly. It's not 8.6. I understand it's 8.6 officially. I get that, all right? But it's 20 if you look at housing, energy, food. The year-over-year rate of inflation is 20%. So they got to 2, and then it skyrockets to 20. So the Fed has no idea what they're doing, and they're forced to hike into a recession because they have no choice, because home ownership is unaffordable, and the economy is not functioning for anybody who isn't in the ultra top end, the top quintile of the economic strata.
And that's the good news. Well, the old saying, Michael, recession's when you're out of work, a depression's when I'm out of work, or like the definition of minor surgery, that's surgery that someone else has. If I got it, it's major, even if I'm getting a hangnail removed. But so they can't cut because they're in a trap, because then the dollar will just get decimated, right? And they just keep raising, and then the dollar keeps going higher, which is killing manufacturing and exports because it's up, it's way up. And but it's good to know that we're not in a recession, even though by the traditional definition of a recession, we're in one, and arguably the GDP deflator has been distorted. We could have easily been in one for 3 to 4 quarters, and nobody seems to be looking at that either, right?
You mean the trimmed mean, hedonically adjusted inflation indicator from the personal consumption expenditure index, price index? You mean that's not really an accurate measurement of inflation? Is that what you're telling me? No, I gotta say that, if inflation is running at 20% in reality, and 8.6% the way the BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, calculated, which is a division of the Labor Department, 8.6%. It's that high, really a record high, even going back to 1980. We're at a record high rate of inflation with the US dollar surging by 15% year over year. I would like to imagine, see, this is my conundrum here. And not really mine, it's the Fed, it's Mr. Powell, who should have taken that victory lap. He should have said, you know what? Last year, I don't need to run again. I was successful getting us out of the great pandemic, and I'm retiring with my hundreds of millions of dollars.
Go out on top.
with his hubris and arrogance, he wanted to stay on. But here's the conundrum for Mr. Powell now. If he assents to the supplicant Wall Street and says, I want to cut rates now to save the U.S. from the recession and the stock market, which is down, and it's a bear market in every index that you measure, every major index that counts. What's going to happen to the U.S. dollar at that point? Well, as I said, it's up 15% year over year, and we have record high inflation. The U.S. dollar is going to tank. And if you tell the world at that point, when inflation was 8.6% in May, year over year, inflation was 8.6%. So we no longer have this, oh, we can't get inflation. Oh, we have productivity. We're importing deflation. All that bull, that is over. We know how to create inflation now. You pay people to stay at home and not work. They've done that already. They've done it. It's called helicopter money. It worked spectacularly. I could have told them that, hey, you want inflation? Give people a check monetized by the Federal Reserve, create new money, bring the base money supply from 800 billion to 9 trillion, and tell people not to go outside because they're going to die if they take a breath of air. Well, then you get inflation. So if we go now, if the Fed tries to save the economy and the stock market now, when inflation just was 8.6%, you've inculcated now very clearly how to get inflation through exactly what they need to do to get it higher, to stop the stock market from falling and from the economy from sinking. Your inflation is going to run intractable. So, and here's the other side of that. If they actually fight inflation like they just started doing, I mean, we now have the effective Fed funds rate is 1.6%. Inflation is at 8.6. Effective Fed funds rate is 1.6. Okay, that's 700 basis points of rate hikes that they need to do. But maybe they don't have to go so far. Let's just say, Kerry, the Fed believes that neutral is 3 to 3.5. That's what they say. Mm-hmm. Well, they're still miles away from 3.5% just to get to neutral. Yeah. They have to go to restrictive. And the balance sheet has to start really the balance sheet is only contracted by 74 billion. So not that much. We're still at $8.9 trillion on the balance sheet. So they're just starting to they're just now starting to fight inflation, but we're already in a recession and we already have a bear market. So I wouldn't want to be Mr. Powell. No way.
Isn't that the definition, Michael, of stagflation, what we got here?
You have right now you have stagflation. I think on the second derivative basis, you'll be in disinflation in the next few months. The only question I have after that is, will it become outright deflation and depression? Because that's a very real risk. The credit markets are signaling to me. I don't listen to Brian Belsky and the rest of the show on CNBC. It's just unwatchable what comes out of their mouth. One guy Leibniz is talking about factories are popping up all over the place. I mean, let's look at reality. What is the market trading on? It's trading on the fact that the Fed is forced to aggressively, perhaps the most aggressive tightening cycle ever, into a recession.